Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is, well, it's arguably the most ambitious we've ever taken on. We're looking at traveling 500,000 miles round trip in under 40 minutes.
And we're doing that by digging into this incredible stack of sources we have. Articles, confidential debriefings, even operational notes.
They detail a future where humanity, after more than 50 years away, finally decides to go back to the moon.
But this isn't some, straightforward celebration of a smooth landing. Not at all. The real story here is what happens when every single technological hurdle you can imagine.
Right.
And decades of budget fights and these unbelievable geopolitical tensions all collide with plain old human error,
Right.
but in deep space.
It's just a phenomenal blueprint for failure and somehow for recovery.
It really is.
So the sources, they lay out this near-future program. You've got NASA's Mercy mission on one hand. That's the Orion capsule and the Altair lunar lander.
And then running right alongside it, you have this aggressive private company, Space Excursions, with their tourism ship, the Dreamscape.
And for this deep dive, we're really going to focus on pulling out the key pressure points, the technical ones, the logistical ones, and maybe most importantly, the psychological ones that define this completely chaotic and history-making rescue mission.
To really get it, you have to go back to where the first era ended. Our sources start right there with the absolute end of the Apollo program.
Apollo 17, 1972.
Exactly. You have to picture Gene Cernan, the last man to walk on the moon, climbing back up that ladder.
And his final words from the surface were so optimistic, weren't they? He said something about humanity returning not too long into the future.
He really believed it. We all did. But what gets lost in that big historical promise is this incredibly personal mark he left behind.
The initials.
The initials. Before he climbed up, Cernan just knelt down in that lunar dust, the regolith, and scratched 3 letters with his finger. TDC?
His daughter's initials.
Yeah. And you have to think, that little inscription, left in a total vacuum, with no wind, no weather, it's going to stay there, completely undisturbed, for lifetimes. It's just the perfect image for this whole thing.
The biggest technological achievement imaginable mixed with the smallest, most human gesture.
Exactly. And that's the premise of this new race.
A human gesture that's about to be tested in the most extreme way possible. So after 50 years, we're back. And our mission today is to jump right into the deep end to understand the systems designed to get us there.
And why they start failing almost immediately.
Forcing human beings to, overcome their own flawed technology.
Yeah, we really need to see how decades of supposed advancement actually hold up when you're out there in the vacuum of cislunar space. And the sources, they throw us right into it with this critical failure during an unmanned test flight.
The Orion capsule and its massive Earth departure stage, the EDS.
Okay, so let's unpack this core philosophy first because it's key.
Yeah.
The new NASA program has made this fundamental shift away from the old way of doing things.
The rocket jockey method, that heroic image of the astronaut with his hand on the throttle.
That's gone, or it's supposed to be. The official line now, the calculation, it heavily favors these automated rendezvous and docking systems. AR&D, they call it.
And the logic is all about safety, right? Precision over the often risky manual approach. The software is supposed to fly the ship.
And that calculation failed.
Yeah.
Immediately. During this critical unmanned test, where the Orion capsule was supposed to gently, link up with this massive 90-foot long EDS.
The stage that's carrying all the fuel for the trip to the moon.
All the cryogenic fuel, yeah.
Yeah.
The automated system just completely seized up. And Mission Control wasn't looking at one failure, but 2 simultaneous contradictory malfunctions.
Okay, what were they?
First, a laser ranging discrepancy. The system just couldn't agree on how far apart the 2 vehicles were. And second, and this is the really dangerous one, a sudden, uncommanded acceleration.
Wait, it was speeding up. It was supposed to be braking.
It was supposed to be braking, but instead it was driving the Orion forward.
Hard. The engineering reports quantify that surge rate.
They do. They call it delta VXS, a change of velocity of just over 5 meters per second.
Which is about, 15 feet per second? That doesn't sound like a lot in space.
It sounds like nothing, but you have to understand the physics of docking. They're supposed to come together so gently. We're talking fractions of a centimeter per second. A soft dock.
So at 15 feet per second, that's not a gentle bump.
It's catastrophic. I mean, you're talking about an impact that wouldn't just destroy the Orion capsule. It would rupture the massive fuel tanks of the EDS.
Turning it into a 90-foot long bomb.
An extremely expensive bomb.
Yeah.
The mission dies right there. in Earth orbit. Billions of dollars and years of delay, just gone.
And the sources say the GPS data failed at the same time.
It did. And that told the engineers that whatever was happening, it wasn't just one bad sensor. It was something deeper, a systemic computer problem that could affect the whole program.
And all while this is happening, while controllers are trying to figure out how to stop this crash, they're fighting against this other invisible enemy.
The single most crippling constraint of deep space travel.
Propellant boil-off.
This is the brutal reality of cryogenic fuels. That massive EDS is powered by liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. You need that for the high-energy push to the moon, the translunar injection, or TLI.
And to keep hydrogen liquid, it has to be kept at, what, minus 423 degrees Fahrenheit.
Unbelievably cold. And the sources use this perfect analogy for the tanks holding it. They call them an imperfect thermos bottle in orbit.
I love that, an imperfect thermos.
And that imperfection is a silent mission killer. No matter how good your insulation is, heat from the sun, from the Earth, it always seeps in. And that heat causes the liquid hydrogen to evaporate, to boil off.
You have to vent that gas, or the tank would just rupture.
So you're just uselessly venting it into space. Which means for every single minute they spend trying to fix that docking failure, they're silently losing mass.
Mass that they need for thrust later on.
Precisely. It all comes down to a deadline the engineers call the TLI commit point. TLI is that huge engine burn that pushes you out of Earth orbit towards the moon.
And if you lose too much hydrogen through boil-off before you get to that specific point in your orbit,
there just isn't enough fuel left to make it to the moon. At all.
So even if you fix the docking problem, if you take too long, you're stranded. Marooned in Earth orbit, the fuel's just gone.
Which forces mission control to take huge risks. They might have to commit to that TLI burn before they're 100% sure the system is stable.
The pressure on Commander Bill Stetson and his team must have been just immense, defined entirely by this silent ticking clock of escaping hydrogen.
So what did they find? What was causing this runaway acceleration? It wasn't a software bug, was it?
No, it was a simple, mass-produced piece of hardware.
The classic single point of failure. The thing that haunts every complex system. It was traced to a specific circuit board from the Alcoa Electric Corporation.
And the way it failed is terrifyingly simple.
It is. The board basically made the Orion mistake its current location for its previous one.
A devastating logic loop.
The worst kind. The computer, thinking it was still far away, just kept firing the thrusters to close the gap. It was accelerating when it should have been braking. A design oversight that almost killed the whole program.
And here's where the problem just explodes in scale. That same flawed board wasn't just on the test vehicle.
No, it was everywhere. It's used all across the system. Key components in the Orion capsule itself, and even in the Altair lunar lander.
That is the definition of a nightmare scenario for any program administrator. Or for a politician like Senator Newsom, who's always watching the budget.
Right. It immediately raises the specter of a generic design flaw. Something baked into the very architecture of the program.
If it was a one-off thing, they could patch it, maybe change some procedures.
But if the physical design of this board is just fundamentally faulty, the whole moon program could be delayed for years.
Years. You'd have to redesign, manufacture, test a whole new system, scrap components you've already built.
Costing billions more. And giving someone like Senator Newsom all the ammunition he needs to just cut the program entirely.
The political risk from one tiny circuit board is just enormous.
It's a perfect illustration of how all this complexity, this reliance on automation, can be completely undone by a cheap, simple error. And it's immediate proof that maybe, just maybe, you still need those old rocket jockeys and their manual skills.
So we have this fundamentally flawed system operating under this crushing time limit from the boiling fuel. But let's just pause for a second and acknowledge the sheer power that's supposed to overcome all this. The EDS uses the J2X engine.
Yeah, this is an upgraded version of the legendary J2 from the Saturn V rockets. It's an absolute marvel of engineering.
And the power it generates is staggering.
Ah.
But the trick is keeping it from melting itself.
The trick is cooling. The combustion chamber hits about 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot enough to vaporize pretty much any metal.
So how do they stop it from destroying itself?
It's ingenious. They circulate that incredibly cold liquid hydrogen fuel, the minus 423 degrees stuff, through these tiny pipes all wrapped around the outside of the nozzle before it gets injected and burned.
So the fuel itself acts as the coolant.
Exactly. The fuel cools the engine, and in turn, the engine's heat pre-warms the fuel just enough to make the whole process super efficient. It's this kind of high-stakes, high-tolerance tech that's supposed to get them through.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly. We have this stressed, brittle NASA system. Now let's pivot to the external forces that are driving this new space race.
The commercial side and the geopolitical side.
And the commercial rise is maybe the most disruptive thing in these sources. We're introduced to space excursions run by this charismatic guy, Gary Childers.
And his company developed its reusable tourism ship, the Dreamscape, in about 10 years. They operate with a speed and an economic model that NASA, with all its bureaucracy, just can't touch.
The cost difference is just staggering when you look at the numbers. Dreamscape offers tourist flights around the moon for $25 million a seat.
So even with a full crew of 5, that's a total mission cost of $125 million.
Now compare that to the billions with a B that NASA spends on a single landing mission, where basically every part is custom built and single use.
Childers' whole model is based on reusability and efficiency. The Dreamscape can refuel in orbit from a tanker satellite. It glides back to a landing at their own spaceport in Nevada.
Reusability is everything. The Dreamscape can fly again in weeks. NASA's Orion, even this new version, is still mostly disposable.
And that speed, that ability to turn around a moon mission so quickly, is going to become absolutely critical later in this story. But they're not the only competition.
No. The old rival is back. China is playing hardball.
They launched their own robotic lunar mission, the Harmony, and that puts immense pressure on the U.S. timeline.
Commander Bill Stetson, in his personal notes, he points out the stark difference in public perception.
Yeah, he notes that while the U.S. program is constantly fighting politicians like Senator Newsom over every dollar, in China, the taikonauts are treated like undisputed national heroes. The public demands more space exploration, not less.
That gives their program a huge strategic advantage.
In this tension, it escalates beyond just a political rivalry into a direct military confrontation in space.
This detail from the sources is just shocking. A few days before the U.S. rescue mission, a piece of depleted uranium, launched covertly by China, collides with and completely obliterates the U.S. Lunar Mapper spacecraft.
This was not an accident. This was not space junk. This is a calculated anti-satellite weapon test, an AS test.
Intentional and devastating. The impact was at 4 kilometers per second. That's 8 times faster than a bullet. The goal was obvious.
To blind the U.S.,
Yeah.
to stop them from making high-resolution maps of the moon for at least 2 years, giving China a free hand to pick the best spots for resources or bases.
And the sources confirmed China had already shown they could do this in low Earth orbit back in 2007.
But this proved they had extended that capability out to the entire Earth-Moon system. Space exploration is now a potential combat zone.
So NASA, at first, they thought it was just space junk, right?
Yeah, a civilian agency assumes an accident, but the National Reconnaissance Office, they knew, they saw it for what it was. A powerful geopolitical signal.
Okay, so the environment is set. NASA is struggling with bad circuit boards and boiling fuel. The private sector is showing off its speed. And China is willing to shoot down satellites. And it's into this incredibly tense situation that the real crisis erupts.
And ironically, it begins with the private sector. The Dreamscape crew, they're on their tourist flight around the moon.
And as they go behind the moon, they hit that mandatory radio blackout, no contact with Earth.
It's during that silent period that they pick up a signal. A faint, desperate SOS coming from the lunar surface.
And it confirms the horrifying truth. The crew of that Chinese ship, the Harmony, they crashed 7 days earlier near the South Pole.
And this signal includes a terrifying countdown. They only had airlift for another 8 days.
So these tourists, they immediately shift into search mode. They use their onboard telescope.
And they find it. The images are clear. The Chinese ship is on its side. There's a gaping hole near the engines.
But this revelation immediately crashes into global politics. Because despite having this undeniable audio and visual proof, the Chinese government vehemently denies the story.
The denial is absolute. The official line is that the Harmony mission was just a robotic rehearsal.
That the reports of a crew are outrageous and fabricated.
It's a classic case of preserving honor or face. Admitting a failure that led to the almost certain death of national heroes would be a political disaster.
So they're just going to let them die, silently abandon them rather than face embarrassment.
That's the choice they made. And that moral vacuum forces NASA's hand. The scientific mission, Mercy Kasoi, is now a unilateral rescue operation.
And the NASA administrator, Calvin Ross, he sees the political angle immediately. Saving the Chinese crew would make America heroes, secure funding, and shut down critics like Senator Newsom for good.
But the technical challenges are just insane.
Ross, Stetson, and mission specialist Dr. Anthony Chow, They have to come up with a radical plan, and fast.
And look at this timeline. The U.S. launches in 3 days. The trip to the moon takes 3 days. That leaves the Chinese crew with maybe 1 or 2 days of oxygen left when they arrive.
There is zero room for error.
And they have to completely change their landing site. Scrap the plan for Taurus Littrow near the equator and head for the crash site near the South Pole.
Which requires a huge change in trajectory. But they catch a lucky break here, right? A piece of technical foresight.
A crucial one. The Altair lander was intentionally over-designed. Unlike the old Apollo landers, which were stuck landing near the equator, Altair was built to land pretty much anywhere on the moon.
That over-design, which was probably just a political selling point at first, now becomes a life-saving feature.
It does. But even with a robust lander, the biggest problem is weight. The ascent stage, the part that has to lift off the moon, is designed for a crew of 4.
It absolutely cannot lift 6 people. 2 Americans plus the 4 Chinese taikonauts.
And this is where the big moral and logistical fight happens. The first idea is just cold math. Stetson goes down alone, leaves his crew in orbit, and just brings up the 4 Chinese.
But Administrator Ross, he insists on a 2-man landing crew, Stetson and Dr. Chow, for the medical needs.
Chow himself pushes for it. He knows there could be serious injuries. He feels a moral obligation to be there.
So they decide to send Chow. But that one extra person, his body weight, his suit, it represents a massive amount of excess mass they have to get rid of somewhere else.
And the sacrifices are just painful. They have to dump all their rocks, the priceless science samples they were supposed to collect. They have to leave behind most of the science hardware.
They're sacrificing the entire scientific purpose of the mission.
And here's the most shocking part for the engineers.
Yeah.
They have to physically remove exterior panels from the lander to make up the weight difference.
They're literally stripping the lander down, flying it with holes in it, just to save enough mass for one extra person.
It just shows you how tiny their margins are. Every single ounce matters. And the weight problem doesn't stop at the moon.
Right. Once they have all 6 survivors crammed into that Orion capsule for the trip home, they're too heavy for a safe Earth landing.
The sources are clear on this. The Orion was designed to land on the ground, not in the ocean. It doesn't have the right flotation gear for 6 people. A direct entry would probably mean a crash or drowning.
So they have to pull out this old contingency plan from the Apollo days, something that sounds like pure science fiction.
The aero capture maneuver.
It's just a spectacular piece of space acrobatics. Instead of just plowing into the atmosphere, the Orion capsule will skim the very upper edge of it.
Right, using the friction to slow down just enough to get captured into a stable Earth orbit. It requires precision measured in meters. If you're too high, you bounce off into deep space forever. Too low, you burn up.
It's like skipping a stone on a pond, but the pond is planet Earth. And this maneuver does 2 things at once, right?
Correct. If they get the angle just right, the skim also changes their orbital inclination to match the International Space Station, the ISS.
Which is the final radical part of the plan. They'll dock with the ISS, drop off the 4 Chinese passengers.
And maybe Chow or the Chinese doctor if they need serious medical help.
And then the now lightened Orion can return home safely. It's a brilliant, multi-stage, insane plan hatched in less than a day.
All betting on this one maneuver that hasn't been done in decades. But as we always see in these deep dives, even the best plans fall apart in space.
And the sources just document this grueling series of improvisations, proving Stetson's point from earlier. Robots can't think on their feet. Only humans could save this mission.
The first problem happens during TLI, that big burn towards the moon. The ghost of the test flight comes back.
The solar array seizes up again, stops tracking the sun.
And their battery power just starts plummeting. If they can't fix it, they can't even get into lunar orbit, let alone land. That generic design flaw is still haunting them.
Stetson knows what to do, though. He has to do a spacewalk, an EVA. But the Orion doesn't have an airlock.
Which means Dr. Chow has to suit up too, just to keep the air in the cabin when Stetson opens the main hatch. And Stetson is doing this on the outside of a ship that is under full thrust from the J2X engine.
He's crawling along the hull to get to this 18-foot array, just to physically force it to work.
He says it was incredibly frustrating. You're surrounded by all this cutting-edge tech, and you have to resort to brute force. His solution is just to kick it. He kicks the array loose.
And it works. A simple physical act triumphs over the complex, flawed machine.
They survive TLI, but the crises just get worse when they get to the crash site. The landing itself is a huge risk. A dark landing, a scenario they had never even simulated. They're flying blind, using just radar and some small lights on the lander.
They land successfully, about 300 meters away. Stetson gets over to the wreck and makes radio contact with the Chinese commander, Captain He.
And that's when he learns how bad it really is. The Chinese are out of power, their suit batteries are almost dead, they have less than an hour of life support left. The timeline is now minutes.
And the big problem is the airlock. The crashed lander is still pressurized, but with no power, they can't run the pumps to open the door.
So Stetson is outside, banging on the hull, and he is trapped inside, watching his air run out.
This is the third great improvisation. Stetson, standing outside, he figures out a workaround. He tells Chow over the radio to tell the Chinese crew to use their suit's remaining battery power.
The power that's designed to run their heaters.
And use it to run the depressurization pump just long enough to crack open the door.
It's a huge gamble. They're trading their last bit of warmth and battery life for one chance to open the door.
And it works. They get the crew out, but the toll of the crash is obvious. The pilot, Ming Feng, is unconscious. The doctor, Xu, has a severed fibula.
And then there's the engineer, Xi Feng. Stetson's notes identify him as a possible political officer or spy. He's acting paranoid, uncooperative.
And it's Xi Feng who causes the single greatest threat to the whole mission. During the transfer to the Orion, in a moment of panic or sabotage, he pulls out a pistol he smuggled aboard and fires 3 shots.
Breaching the hull of the Orion.
3 small holes. The immediate fix is basic. Dr. Chow just slaps on a patch of putty and resin to stop the air leak.
But the real horrifying threat isn't the leak now. It's what those holes mean for the heat shield during that high-speed aero capture they have to do on the way home.
The engineers figured the outer hole where the bullet went through the shield itself would be much larger than the inner one, and the shield is designed to burn away. Any weakness could cause it to just fail completely.
But before they could even worry about that, they still have to get off the moon. They spend 5 grueling hours on the surface with the help of the taikonauts, just throwing everything out, kicking off those exterior panels they loosened before they left Earth.
It really shows you the need for human flexibility. There's this one detail about the Chinese doctor, Yu. He refused pain medication for his broken leg so he could stay clear-headed enough to monitor the unconscious pilot.
You can't program a robot to have that kind of dedication.
They lift off. But the trip home is just one failure after another. The solar array seizes up again. Stetson has to do another EVA.
And after he patches the heat shield on the outside, he tries to get back inside the Orion. And the inner hatch won't open. It's stuck.
This is the ultimate trap. Stetson is locked outside his own ship, and they are minutes away from having to jettison the lander for re-entry.
It's a death sentence either way. If they don't jettison the lander, his weight will kill them all during aero capture. If Stetson stays outside, the heat of re-entry will kill him instantly.
So Mission Control, they've tried everything. Every software command fails, so they authorize the most desperate plan imaginable.
Using the one thing they know works, the pistol that caused the problem in the first place.
The engineering logic here is both brilliant and terrifying. They figure the computer won't open the hatch because it senses a pressure difference. The cabin isn't a perfect vacuum.
So their last-ditch plan is to force the depressurization.
By shooting more holes in the ship.
Yes. The plan is for Dr. Chow, inside the Orion, to fire 3 very calculated shots into the nose cone, away from any primary electronics.
They're deliberately creating a leak to fool the safety system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A controlled leak. Just enough to trick the computer into thinking the depressurization is complete so they can manually pull the hatch open at the last second.
And Chow, the doctor, now has to become a demolition expert. He has to take his gloves off to get the precision he needs.
He pulls it off. The shots work. The pressure drops. They haul Stetson inside just seconds before atmospheric entry begins. It's just an incredible moment of using destruction to save a life.
They survive the aero capture, this bone-rattling 10G ride. But unbelievably, it's still not over.
No. They're captured by Earth's gravity, but they miss their target. They're in the wrong orbit. 44 degrees inclination instead of the 52 degrees they need to get to the ISS.
And then the final crisis hits. The propellant lines, probably damaged from the bullet holes or the insane turbulence, they start leaking.
Attitude control thrusters start firing continuously. The ship is spinning, and they're rapidly running out of fuel. They don't have enough fuel to get to the ISS, and they don't have enough oxygen for 6 people to wait for a traditional rescue.
They're sitting ducks.
And this is where the private sector comes back in to complete the circle. The Dreamscape, which had just landed from its tourist flight, was quickly prepped and launched back into orbit.
Their mission now is to save the saviors.
The Dreamscape crew spends 2 days chasing the spinning, leaking Orion. a high-risk orbital rendezvous.
And they do it. The private ship docks with the distressed NASA capsule. All 6 survivors transfer over and finally ride home, landing on a runway in Nevada.
What an absolute marathon of technical failure, human endurance, and just chaotic success. So let's try to pull out the ultimate takeaways from this.
The biggest one, the one that's demonstrated again and again, is the human factor. All this advanced tech, all this automation, and the mission was repeatedly saved by human ingenuity, improvisation, and just sheer guts.
It totally refutes that whole philosophy of prioritizing automation. Stetson kicking the solar array loose, Chow shooting a hole in the ship, Stetson literally bending a fuel line shut with his hands in zero-G to stop the leak.
No robot could have done any of that. The technology got them there, but it was the human spirit, the manual override, that got them back.
And politically, the mission was a huge win. The rescue was a global story. It made America and its astronauts heroes, securing funding and silencing the critics, just as Administrator Ross predicted.
It also highlights this new synergistic future for space. NASA handled the highest risk part, the deep space part, the landing, the aero capture.
They were the backbone. The private industry, Dreamscape, they provided the crucial search and discovery at the beginning and the final rescue and transport at the end. They had the agility and the speed that a bureaucracy like NASA just doesn't have.
So it's not NASA versus private industry.
It's NASA and private industry. You needed both. Both were non-negotiable to save those 6 lives.
Commander Stetson's final thought in the mission report really sums it all up. He doesn't feel exhausted or beaten down. He feels elated, confident.
He realized that humanity had faced the worst that space could throw at them, and they had what it took to survive, even when all the machines failed.
It's a powerful conclusion, but it takes us right back to the beginning, to the politics that started this whole rescue. We have to think about the Chinese government's decision to just conceal the mission, to let their own crew die for the sake of honor.
They only admitted that taikonauts even existed after the whole world saw the video from the Dreamscape.
Which raises a really profound question for you to think about. If that private tourist ship hadn't picked up that faint SOS, would the world ever have known those taikonauts even made it to the moon?
And that leads to a critical final thought. With all these different players' nations, private companies all racing into deep space, and a demonstrated willingness to hide the truth, even at the cost of human life, what other secrets of space exploration might be buried right now under the banner of national prestige? And as space becomes more commercial, how much harder will it be for anyone to keep those secrets in the future?